Everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar this morning. We'll wait for everyone to come on. This morning is going to be an exciting webinar because we are talking about one of our most important assets, which is our airport here in the Sacramento region. Going to wait a couple more minutes to make sure that we have guests on this wonderful webinar. Okay, awesome. Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Willard, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Public Relations for the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. And we are talking today a little bit about our air service development and our local businesses and how this is a great asset for us. So the Sacramento County Department of Airports, in partnership with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council and Sacramento County Economic Development, invites you to participate in an online webinar in which we will examine the COVID-19's impact on the airport service department and the progress and kind of the momentum. We will highlight the lessons learned thus far and provide insight regarding some future indicators and bright spots on the horizon. We'll have a panel discussion focused on economic development factors that impact Sacramento's traffic growth, and we'll also solicit your feedback in prioritizing service objectives in the nonstop markets that most interest you. So thank you all for joining us in this discussion. We will be starting the webinar momentarily. A few housekeeping notes: the webinar is being recorded. So following today's program, we'll be sending a post-webinar survey that will include a link to the recording. For those that have technical issues or general questions, please utilize the chat function in your Zoom toolbar. If you have a question for a speaker, please submit it using the Q&A tool. We will work to get as many questions as possible, and we'll work to follow up with additional information on those that we are unable to get to. So we are proud today to partner with the Sacramento International Airport. For today's program, we will examine the COVID-19's impact, like I said earlier, the air service development progress and momentum. We will highlight the lessons learned thus far and provide insight regarding some future indicators and bright spots on the horizon, and have a panel discussion focused on economic development factors that impact traffic growth. We have a really great program lined up for you today for the next hour. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to Cindy Nickel, Director of Airports for Sacramento County Airport System. Good morning, Cindy. Cindy, for background, I know we're all really eager to learn about the developments at the Sacramento International Airport, and good morning to you.
Great, thank you, Michelle. We greatly appreciate our partnership with GSEC, as well as our partnership with other colleagues in the county, especially in challenging times like these. And welcome everyone, we're so glad you can join us today. Today we wanted to focus on what our recovery is looking like as the COVID-19 pandemic evolves, and of course, your air service needs and wants. As some of you may know, 95% of our passengers at Sacramento International Airport, or SMF, begin or end their trip by air in this region. So we care about where your customers and employees want to fly to and from. But we also want you to know we care about the health and safety of our passengers. Please check out the video on our website, as well as those that have been done by other airlines, to see what we're all doing to keep people as safe as possible, including cleaning frequently and deeply, installing plexiglass guards, requiring everyone to wear masks, and keeping a safe distance away from others, and much more. There's a lot here today that you'll find interesting, including the fact that leisure travel is recovering much faster than business travel, and that's certainly affecting the airline's air service decisions. Thanks again for joining us, And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And I'd like to turn it over to Mark Haneke, Air Service Development Marketing Manager for the Sacramento International Airport, to kind of provide us an update on COVID-19, how that's affected the airport, and what they're seeing right now. So good morning, Mark. Take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Michelle. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. I appreciate this opportunity to share with you what we've learned over the last few months. Obviously, it's been very difficult for travel and tourism overall, and we've faced some challenges here locally with our airport, but we're seeing some progress, and so I'm happy to share that with you. Let's go to the next slide. So as you can see, over the last few years, just prior to COVID, we were kind of on a great trajectory, having over 8% annual growth over the last 5 to 6 years, and topping out at 13.2 million passengers handled during calendar year 2019. Next. And then reality hit in mid-March of this year, where COVID started to take hold and traffic levels just plummeted. And we hit our low point around April 20th. And then we started to see some progress begin in May, and that picked up in June and into early July. Things leveled off a bit, but we've generally seen that the trajectory is positive and just little by little slowly increasing and growing over time. So that's where we stand right now. This is taking a look at the TSA throughput. So this is the actual number of people that pass through the TSA checkpoints in both Terminal A and Terminal B. And you can see that in April, we had around 1,000 people per day going through the airport, but that represented about 5% of our regular normal demand. And then that grew in May into June, July, and August. The number on top for month to date, September 20 through September 27th, 7.7. That's the premium, if you will, or the advantage that Sacramento has over the U.S. national average. So we're actually outperforming the national average in terms of our TSA throughput. So that's really encouraging. I think one of the key reasons for that is because we have such a wide draw. There are a lot of rural counties that consider Sacramento International Airport their home. And as some of those counties have not encountered such deep levels of infection, people have continued to travel or started to resume travel accordingly. Next slide. And this gives you an idea of where we stand in terms of where we were pre-COVID or just going into COVID at 161 flights a day. That fell as low as 50 flights a day in May. And then that went up during the summer months, especially June into July, topping out at 92 flights a day. Originally, we had hoped to have about 170 flights a day. And then it came down a bit in September, but looking upwards in October, and then we expect to have additional flights in November as well. So, you know, it's been a similar situation with airports across the country, but we are seeing that things are generally increasing in a positive way. Next slide. And then this is a slide taking a look at Sacramento, which is in orange, versus some of our peer airports. These are other airports that pre-COVID were in the 10 to 15 million passenger per year category. And you can see that we line up 4th out of these 10 airports in terms of where things stand for schedules for next month. That starts tomorrow. We have both the departing monthly seats as well as the number of nonstop flights, average flights per day. So you'll see that for October, we're at 86 flights a day. And then this looks at our nonstop route map. This is for October. So you can see that in spite of the fact that we've lost about half of our flights, we still have quite a good breadth of nonstop service across the entire country and even into Hawaii and also Mexico. We found that Mexico has also grown pretty substantially, rebounded pretty quickly in some of our VFR markets, which is visit friends and relatives. And then a highlight at the top bullet there too, in addition to the 28 existing nonstop destinations, in November, we expect to have reinstatement of service to Cabo San Lucas, new nonstop service to Mexico City, resuming service to Austin, Boise, Spokane, and Houston Hobby airports as well. This is taking a look at the US metro growth rates with COVID taken into consideration. So you can see that the red line in the middle of the graph is the US national average, and Sacramento falls above that line. It's about a third of the way down. Generally speaking, the high-tech markets like San Jose, Raleigh, Austin are faring better than markets that are more focused on leisure, such as Orlando, Las Vegas, Nashville, etc. And so that's where things stand right now. It remains to be seen what will happen over the longer term, depending on if there's a second or multiple waves of this pandemic. This also is information from Oxford Economics, like the last slide. It shows that Sacramento is in the is in the upper right-hand quadrant of the growth chart in terms of both average employment figures over the next 4 years, as well as GDP growth over the next 4 years. So other markets that are high tech tend to be performing a bit better, but we're definitely in the right quadrant there for continued growth, and the fundamentals are there for us to be able to weather this hopefully pretty well. Time will tell. And then this is also something from Oxford Economics, where what initially had been labeled as a more V-shaped recovery, similar to what was encountered after 9/11, this is turning out to be more of a checkmark shaped recovery. That's what's appearing, where it's a bit more of a trailing tail to the right going out in the future. And of course, if there's another wave or multiple waves, that will stunt that growth that much further and spread out the recovery further into the future. So at this point, originally we were hoping for a 24 to 36 month recovery. That might be more realistically thought of at this point in time based on a 36 to 48 month recovery back to full 2019 traffic levels. Looking at a couple of artificial barriers to passenger demand recovery, some of you might be aware that the governor of Hawaii instituted a mandatory 14-day quarantine. They were the first state to do that back in March, and traffic dropped to Hawaii overnight. All flights were canceled. Then Hawaiian Airlines came back in mid-July. And now the key development there is that in October, on the 15th, there is a new testing program that will enable passengers arriving in Hawaii to avoid a 14-day quarantine as long as they provide a negative COVID test of results within 72 hours. Likewise, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut implemented their own 14-day quarantine back in June, and initially California was included on that list of quarantine states. So that stunted growth to and from those three states, but also more generally to and from the Northeast overall. And on September 15th, California was removed from that list. And so now people are able to travel to and from California and those three states without any quarantine. In terms of proactive measures that we've taken for air service retention and recovery measures, I've been in regular direct contact with the network planning departments at all of our incumbent airlines and even at a couple of prospective airlines. We've been engaging with key network planning staff through webinars sponsored by our air service development consultant, Campbell, and also participated in webinars sponsored by Oxford Economics and some other firms as well, just to keep abreast of what the latest developments are in thinking in terms of recovery trends and rates. Additionally, the airport and the airport system overall has taken some steps to reduce costs to alleviate some pressure on the airlines serving our airport and as well as the concessionaires. In terms of schedule developments, some positive spots on the horizon are that Volaris resumed nonstop service to Guadalajara on June 1st after a 2-month suspension, and they resumed a full schedule at pre-COVID levels by August. And they're adding twice weekly new nonstop service to Mexico City beginning November 10th. Delta added back its third flight to Atlanta beginning in October, and they resumed twice daily nonstop service to Minneapolis in this month. Additionally, United Airlines resumed Houston intercontinental service nonstop during the month of September after a 5-month hiatus, and they're upgauging the flight to larger aircraft in October. And finally, 3 airlines will be providing nonstop service to Cabo over the Christmas and New Year's holiday. The historical incumbents, Alaska Airlines and Southwest, will be joined this season by American Airlines as well. So that's something to keep in mind for your future travel planning. In terms of lessons learned thus far in the crisis, so the recovery fundamentals are strong relative to some of our peer airports, as you saw in some of my slides, but full recovery will likely take longer than expected. Nonstop service has been restored to all major domestic hubs with the exception of Detroit with Delta, Newark with United, and Washington Dulles with United. But we see that airlines are continuing to increase their capacity to and from the hubs, which provide connecting opportunities across the country and around the world through additional frequencies and aircraft upgauges. So we're pleased by the improvements that we're seeing in that front. And as I mentioned earlier, the visit friends and family and relatives traffic is rebounding faster than we expected. So we're really pleased with that and fostering and encouraging as much growth there as we can. Finally, just as a general comment, passenger demand in leisure markets is recovering at a faster and stronger rate than is business markets. But as I mentioned, well, one thing is that a lot of the hubs that the airlines have are in key business centers. So nonstop service does continue to some of those key business markets. Next one. And finally, for conclusions, so overall, we believe that SMF is well poised for a solid recovery. We're hoping and thinking that it won't be a long delayed recovery, similar to what we saw after the financial crisis in 2009. The fundamentals are different now. The initial traffic recovery results are encouraging. And the biggest unknowns at this point are the timing and approval for a widespread vaccine that's available to all passengers and the public, as well as the impact on customer confidence in terms of returning to the skies. Also, just as a general thought, I think that we'll see new opportunities emerge for nonstop destinations in medium and short haul routes to beach destinations and sun destinations that could likely lead to more flights to places like Hawaii and Mexican beach resorts as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. It's good to hear that flights are opening up in Mexico City and Atlanta. So thank you for your insight. We really appreciate it. And I know you have a fun poll you spent time putting together for our participants watching. So why don't you pull that up?
Yeah, so for a little audience participation, we'd appreciate if you go ahead and online just to fill this out. So the first of 2 questions for this round, which of the following destinations, and it really is more regions, are most important to you and your business in terms of preferring nonstop flights? You're welcome to select multiple choices there. So we have the East Coast with Boston, New York, Washington, the Southeast and Florida with Atlanta, Orlando, and Miami, Midwest, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Texas, Dallas, Houston, and Austin, the Northwest with Portland and Seattle, Intra-California with the LA Basin and San Diego, and Hawaii and international. So if you could go ahead and fill that out. And the second question to follow right on to that, under normal circumstances, please note the approximate amount of time that your Sacramento-based employees, could you go down on that, arrow down on that question? What percentage of time Sacramento-based employees use SMF versus alternative airports in the region? So if you could answer those questions really quickly, give it about 20 or 30 seconds, we'd appreciate that.
It's interesting seeing them come up, Mark.
Okay. You might want to arrow down on the page though, just so I can see the second question.
I'm all the way down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, as far as I can go.
Oh, I guess maybe that's on individual pages. There we go. Okay.
All right.
So take
We
it
have a
away.
lot of Midwest and East Coast fans, Mark.
Okay, great.
What we're seeing.
Excellent. So thank you for participating on that. We'll keep that information available and share it later as well. Oh, there it is. There are the results. So this is really good. This is helpful for us. As I mentioned, we have really good nonstop coverage across the country right now, especially to the hubs. But this is something that we wanted to use as a gauge going forward in terms of what markets we want to focus on. Thank you very much. Back to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it. So next up, I'd like to hand it over to Kevin Shore, who's the Vice President at Campbell Hill Aviation Group. And he'll kind of give a high-level overview update on what's happening in the U.S. aviation industry as a whole and the state of travel across the country. So Mark, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Campbell Hill Aviation Group is a boutique aviation consulting firm in Alexandria, Virginia. We're just across the river from Washington, D.C. We do economic regulatory consulting work for airlines, airports, and any other aviation entity. And I want to thank Mark and Cindy for their comments and their insight. They gave you sort of the nuts and bolts view of what's happening right now in Sacramento. I'm going to take that 30 or 40,000 foot view, so cruising altitude, if you will, to talk about the industry and what we see happening. So where are we now? So looking at this slide here, this is a heat map, and we're looking at TSA throughput by state, comparing this April compared to last April. Now, up until COVID-19, we never looked at TSA throughput as an indicator or a benchmark, but right now it's actually some of the best data that we have because our typical data sets aren't as useful anymore. The traffic revenue that we typically look at, we can't really pay attention to right now. So looking at this April compared to last April, TSA throughput was down nationwide by 95%. At Sacramento, it was down about 93%. And as you can see from this map, there really were no bright spots. Even the best state was down about 90%. At worst, the states were down 98%. Next slide, please. So we push forward through the summer a bit into August. And as you can see, the heat map has gotten a bit brighter, if you will. Travel TSA throughput was still down 71% in August. As you can see the bottom right there, Sacramento was only down 63%. So the beginning of a trend that you're going to see in that Sacramento seems to be recovering faster than the US on average and California on average. Where are the bright spots in this map? They're in the plain states, they're in the mountains. So Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas. People want to go to places where they can be outside, where they can socially distance. Where they don't have to worry about being close to other people. The other bright spot, another one, South Carolina, for example. But what we continue to see here is that the two coasts, so California and then the Northeast especially, is where we see some of the biggest decline year over year. So looking at that again on a regional basis for August, compared to last August, you could see that the states in the West down 76% year over year, the states in the Northeast about 79%, and those states in the middle down 58%. So again, those states where people can be outside, they can do outdoor recreational activities, they can socially distance, there's mountains, national parks, things like that. And then the middle of the country doing a bit better than the coasts, but still down significantly year over year. So what we're looking at here is the TSA throughput by week. So if we look on the left side, you'll see TSA throughput by week for the United States as a whole. The blue line on top is the weekly throughput for 2019. The orange line is weekly throughput for 2020. So as you could see, for the first 2 months, 2.5 months of the year, we were somewhat tracking 2019 up ever so slightly year over year. So we had about 2 million passengers a day going through security. Then we start seeing the impact of COVID-19 there. And then for the lowest point, that week ending April 18th, TSA throughput on a weekly basis was down 96% year over year. So we'd gone from 2 million passengers a day down to about 100,000. a huge decline. We saw some recovery as the summer went on, and we seem to have plateaued since that point. So right now we're looking at a year-over-year decline of about 69%, or about 700,000 passengers per day. So again, at the beginning of the year, we had about 2 million per day going through security. Right now, 700,000. So now if we look at Sacramento and look at that weekly throughput as well, you could see the beginning of the year, we were doing better year over year. The 2020 line, the orange line, above the blue line for 2019. So at that point, we're seeing 14 to 15,000 a day going through security. We see the impact of COVID-19 on a week basis. The lowest week was that week ending April 11th. At that point, we were down 94% year over year, down to about 1,000 per day going through security. So from that high point in the beginning of the year, 14 to 15,000, down to 1,000. You could see that gradual recovery throughout the summer to where we've plateaued at about 7,000 per day going through security. We're still down about 62% year over year. So looking at the next slide, how does this compare to other California airports? So like I said, for August, Sacramento's down about 63% year over year. The average California airport is down about 76% year over year. So we're about 13 percentage points higher. The lowest airport on the map here you could see is Long Beach, which is down 86.5% year over year. If we're comparing to other Northern California airports, San Francisco's down 85.5%, San Jose 80.8%, Oakland down 73.8%. So again, Sacramento doing much better compared to its peers. If we look at this again compared to the other Northern California airports, if we go back to April, about every airport was in the same predicament. Sacramento was down 93%, Oakland 95%, San Francisco 97%, San Jose 97%. As we go on through the summer, you could see not only did Sacramento recover well from April to August, it also recovered faster than the other Northern California airports. You could see that gap between Sacramento and the other airports getting larger and larger as the summer goes on. Looking at the August data another way, the throughput data, we modeled what does this look like by airline. So it's very interesting, but you could see the airline that saw TSA throughput down the most year over year for August is JetBlue. JetBlue was down 76% year over year. Well, why is that? That's because most of JetBlue's service is focused in the Northeast, which we know has struggled, and then Florida, which has also had fits and starts with COVID. And then we go to the opposite end of the extreme. You could see Allegiant was only down 57%. Well, why is that? Allegiant focuses solely on leisure and VFR markets, VFR being visiting friends and relatives. Frontier, another market, another airline that focuses solely on leisure traffic, down 67%. And I just saw a question from Cindy, why is San Francisco down so much? Well, San Francisco being a hub for United Airlines, United brought down its service significantly to San Francisco. So if you think about a hub operation operates in banks. So you have a lot of flights coming in at the same time, a lot of flights then going out at the same time. So lots of people can connect between flights. Well, what United has done, they have reduced that San Francisco operation from 5 or 6 banks throughout the day to only 2. And not only have they done that, but nearly all of their international service has been discontinued as well, except for a handful of European markets, a little South Pacific, little Asia, India, and Tel Aviv as well. So their operation in San Francisco, much like at Newark, is a shell of the size that it used to be. The interesting thing is if we look at those carriers here at Sacramento's largest carriers, Southwest year over year only down 67%. So we know that Southwest has reduced its capacity a bit less than the other airlines. Your second largest carrier, Delta, down 69%. Third largest carrier, American, down 68%. And this is system-wide, not just for Sacramento. So where do we go from here? So let's look forward a little bit. let's look at October. So seat capacity in the United States by state for October is down about 47%. Sacramento seat capacity for October also down 47%. Now, as the month goes on, the airlines are tweaking their schedules. So October may be down 47%, maybe down 45, maybe down 49. We won't know that until we get to literally October 31st, because the airlines are making changes so close in so that they can only provide as much capacity as they need in any given market. But again, if we look at October, you can see some of the bright spots in the plains there, in the mountains, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, places where people can spread out. But again, states like California and New York are those states that have lost the most capacity for this October compared to last October. And then if we look at Sacramento compared to other California airports, again, a relatively good story. And if we look at all of the major California airports, you could see that the one with the largest capacity decline year over year, San Jose, a market that is solely focused on business travel, down 70% year over year. San Francisco down 63%, Oakland 53%. So you can see Oakland not down as much compared to Sacramento in past months because of a bit more of a focus on leisure traffic. But California as a whole, down 57% year over year. Sacramento about 13 percentage points better, 12, 13 percentage points. Pretty interesting statistics here from Bank of America. And what we've been hearing from the airlines, literally as we talk to them week by week, US leisure traffic is recovering much faster than corporate or business travel. So if we look at the end of August, leisure traffic was down about 51% year over year. If we look at middle of September, data from just a few weeks ago, that traffic was only down 43% year over year. So the only bright spots of demand we're really seeing right now is that leisure traffic. It's very interesting. If we look at business traffic for the end of August, it was down 87%. We look at that same business or corporate travel for mid-September, it was only down 86%. It hasn't budged. And what we're hearing from the airlines, who are talking to their largest customers as often as they can, is a lot of their customers are saying, we don't know when we'll be flying again. And if we do start flying again, it won't be to the same extent that we were flying in 2019. So a real busy chart here, and I apologize for that. I know lots of lines and different colors, but we're looking at the year over year seat change for 2020 compared to 2019 by month. And the important thing is if we go to April, you could see that some carriers were only down 10% year over year for April. Many were down anywhere from about 60 to 70%. At that point, carriers were sort of all over the place. And as we go through the summer, carriers utilize different strategies to try to respond to demand. So if you see Spirit there in the yellow for July, Spirit had a huge boost in July. They were only down 17% year over year. Spirit was gambling on that leisure traffic. And to some extent, the gamble did pay out. But as you could see, as the year went on, they realized there is only so much leisure traffic. And as we go to the end of the year, you have Allegiant as that sort of standout there for October, only down 6% year over year. But then nearly all other carriers sort of clustered in that 40 to 60% range in terms of a year over year reduction in capacity. The other interesting thing to point out here is the difference in capacity reductions by the legacy airlines, American, Delta, United. The low-cost carriers are LCCs, Southwest, JetBlue, and then the ULCCs, the ultra-low-cost carriers, Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant. So as you can see, going through the summer, it's those legacy carriers, the ones that are most dependent upon business travel, reducing their capacity more than the low-cost carriers and the ultra-low-cost carriers. So we know the carriers are doing a lot of things that they don't want to be doing, don't want to be paying attention to things that they're now looking at on a daily basis. But carriers are taking some significant steps that are required now to survive the pandemic. And these steps will have long-term consequences from another of different perspectives. So one of the key things every airline's looking at right now is daily cash burn. Again, not something we ever thought we'd be looking at if you asked me a year ago. But airlines like American are running through $55 million per day in cash. Delta 27 million, United 40, Southwest 20. The bright spot there, Allegiant's only running through about $1 million of cash a day. But again, they're a much smaller airline than some of the other airlines you see there. Active fleet, what percentage of the fleet is actually flying right now versus being stored at an airport somewhere in the United States, or for all intents and purposes, mothballed somewhere in Arizona in the desert. So right now, American's only flying 73% of their active fleet, and that's actually a pretty high number compared to Delta and United. But when COVID first started taking effect, American was one of the first ones to say, we're going to retire a whole lot of airplanes. And since that time, Delta has done the same. United has been sort of the holdout to say, well, we want to see what's going to happen before we make long-term fleet decisions. But you could see to the right there, again, the ULCCs, the ones most focused on leisure travel, Allegiant's flying 93% of their airplanes, Spirit's flying 97%. The other thing that the airlines have done have put forward some fairly aggressive packages to entice employees to either retire early, separate from the company totally, or take a short or long-term leave of absence. So we saw about 23,500 employees at American choose to do so, 19,000 at Delta, 27,000 at United, 17,000 at Southwest. Now, the CARES Act money, the money that was either given to the airlines through September 30th, and the money that is loaned through the airlines, the CARES Act coverage goes away effectively tomorrow. So some of the airlines have warned that if there is not additional support before October 1st, 2 days from now, that they will be forced to lay off and furlough many more employees. So we're all sort of waiting with bated breath to see if the House and the Senate can move forward pretty quickly to come out with a bill that will provide additional support for the airline industry, which is looking at about, I think, a budget of about $26 billion. For all of the airlines as well as airline support companies. And I believe the data that we see here is as of September 17th. So you can see that in the top left there. So really challenging times in the industry right now. What are airlines doing to adapt to this new normal? They're doing lots of different things to adjust their business models. And many of these steps will be in effect for at least the next 18 to 24 months, if not forever. Things like resetting growth expectations, adjusting their fleet plans. Most airlines have retired some aircraft. If they haven't retired aircraft, they're also deferring the delivery of new aircraft. The lack of business demand likely won't be at 2019 levels for at least 2 years. And depending who you talk to, some people think it could be 3 to 5 years. We've talked about more leisure-focused schedules for both domestic and near international. As Mark said earlier, we're seeing some new service to Cabo this year, likely fueled by the focus on leisure travel and the business travel that hasn't recovered yet. We don't have change fees anymore starting the beginning of the year. Whoever thought we'd be in a situation where American, Delta, United would get rid of change fees? And again, the big question is, what does that do for Southwest's competitive advantage since they've never had change fees? And then the increased focus on cargo. Cargo is actually doing well. It's up year over year, and cargo is now driving the strategic planning and scheduling for a lot of the airlines out there. I'm an air service development consultant, so I have to have a route map in my presentation. These are all the new routes that were either announced or started since the beginning of COVID. And if you look to the right, you see the airlines and how many new routes they each have started. Well, it's real interesting because the ones that have started the most or announced the most, JetBlue at 63, American 29, United 27. Normally, you wouldn't think to see them at the top of the list because they typically don't except for JetBlue, American, and United especially, don't do opportunistic flying to leisure markets, we would expect to see the ones at the bottom, Allegiant, Spirit, or Frontier, doing more of that. And if we look at those new markets, the really interesting thing is, not surprisingly, that a good chunk of the markets, 20% hit Florida, but 16% are actually hitting California. The surprising part is that about 6% are hitting New York. So in summary, and I know I went fast, there was a lot of information to look at. The traffic recovery has been slow, but there were some initial promising trends, but that did stall late summer as COVID-19 cases pick up. We know leisure traffic is recovering much faster than business traffic. That trend will continue, and that's where we see the airlines focusing. Sacramento is outperforming California in terms of both passengers and future schedules, and that means for the state as a whole, as well as the other Northern California airports, airlines are looking for leisure opportunities that they've been hesitant to add in the past, but will do so now because of the lack of business traffic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was an incredible presentation, and I'm sure very insightful for many. Glad to see Sacramento is up, and we have great leisure opportunities here in Northern California, having that close proximity to Lake Tahoe. So I now want to switch it over to start our panel discussion. We have amazing panelists to feature today who can kind of talk more about this. So today with us, we have our own Scott Powell, who is our Senior Vice President of Business Development and Research. We have Troy Givens, Director, Department of Economic Development and Marketing for Sacramento County. And we have Ryan DeAngelis, who's the Senior Vice President at CBRE. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning.
So kind of the first question that I think would be interesting for this panel discussion are airports, especially in economic development, are one of the most important driving factors along with commercial real estate. So how do you anticipate new companies and individuals relocating to the region, and how will that impact air travel? So how about we kind of cater this to Scott and Troy?
Great. Troy, if you don't mind, I'll kind of jump in and then kick it over to you. So
absolutely.
So Michelle, thanks for the question. Welcome back to Greater Sacramento. We've seen, kind of two, major indicators on this. So kind of starting with people, we're still seeing we've had people moving into the Greater Sacramento region. We've traditionally outperformed California, but as of late, so Redfin, a great fintech company in the real estate service, has Sacramento last month ranked as the #1 community for people looking for houses, outpacing Phoenix and Austin. And LinkedIn as well has shown that, the majority, the largest number of people switching their profiles to a new location, we were #3 between April and August. So through both of those trends, we are definitely seeing people moving into the Greater Sacramento area. And, we expect that trend to continue. On the business side, you've heard, if you've done any of these panels or webinars with us, growing tradable industry sectors is really what we focus on. And that will really drive the health of our, air travel market. So, initiatives to bring in, better life science or more life science companies like Aggie Square and UC Davis leading that charge, or the California Mobility Center, to make Sacramento a major player within the mobility space, will be major drivers of our economy and major drivers of transportation as well, along with companies like Centene adding 2,500 employees and putting in their California regional headquarters here, are all positive indicators long-term that the business side of travel will be healthy long-term once we kind of come out of the COVID area.
Great,
So,
thanks so much, Scott. Troy?
Sure, I concur with Scott's assessment of that, and there are a couple things I would add on. So when we look at this from a couple of different perspectives, one from the people standpoint, from a residential construction standpoint, building permits are still steady and strong throughout the region, throughout the unincorporated area of Sacramento County, and through our partners within cities within this area. So that speaks to Scott's point about a continued influx of people showing interest of moving into this region that are continuing to drive things from both an air traffic standpoint as well as an economic recovery standpoint. Secondly, I think when you look at some of the areas, when you look at our region as a whole and the fact that we have space for industrial, space for commercial and office, as Scott had referenced some of the companies that are coming in, not specific to any one jurisdiction, but working as a whole in this region where we have the ability to accommodate a number of these tradable sectors, as Scott had mentioned. I think the trends, we have not been hit as hard as some of the other communities within the California region or in the Western United States for that matter. The fact that we recognize obviously the short-term impacts of this pandemic, but the longer-term trends, I think, and where we're positioned in the marketplace puts us in a very competitive spot.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Troy, for that. So looking specifically at the industrial real estate market, this is something where we have, it's booming, I would say, on the industrial side in the Sacramento region. I think CoStar came out with something, so I'll have maybe Scott reference that. But looking specifically at it, what are some trends you're seeing through COVID-19? And maybe Ryan and Troy would be good speakers on this.
Sure. Thanks for having me here. I think this is not news to everybody, but I mean, I think the biggest driver these days is e-commerce, and it has completely changed the industrial landscape, not just here in Sacramento, but frankly across the country. Demand for large fulfillment centers, but it's also demand for what we call last mile fulfillment centers, which is where they essentially sort the package and get it out to your house. The networks are growing rapidly. Amazon, who's obviously the big player in that space, is building out their own network. But I think you're also going to start seeing, well, you are seeing it. You're going to see the FedExes, you're going to see the UPSs. They're going to continue to build out their networks as well. Maybe Amazon doesn't use them, but there are others that do. And so I would see continued demand from those type of folks.
Yes, I would agree with Ryan's assessment that the trend towards e-commerce, what the pandemic has done is just kind of fueled that transition, I think, as more people are staying home and the demand for e-commerce, and as these networks are built out and the customer base expects quicker turnaround on delivery, and these networks to support that are built out. As Ryan had mentioned, we have 3.5 million plus square feet under construction or starting the process out at Metro Air Park, primarily fueled by e-commerce and distribution facilities. We have a tremendous amount of capacity out at Metro Air Park. It's 1,900 plus or minus acres. We're building a new interchange to the tune of $30 million to allow for ingress and egress of the more consistent and efficient movement of goods in that region. The fact that it's adjacent to our airport, and to Ryan's earlier point about FedEx, UPS, other delivery entities within that space. We have, it's not just Sacramento International Airport, but we have an airport system here where we have actually more runway capacity, including Mather and McClellan and others. We have more runway capacity than some smaller states in the Northeast. So we've been blessed with, we had the curse of the military moving out from former sites, but we've inherited those assets through the base closure process, and we're able to reutilize those. And they are assets that are hard to replicate. So it puts us in a position for companies that are looking to expand and fit into this new model of retail and delivery of goods. We have ample capacity here within our airport system to accommodate folks like that.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing to that. Is back in December, prior to this pandemic, I was on a panel, and in December we did a little analysis, and e-commerce at that time, e-commerce only accounted for 10% of all retail sales. So, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of room to run for e-commerce. Now, I'd be interested to see what that statistic shows today after 6 months of COVID. It's probably doubled. But still, there is a tremendous amount of upside in the e-commerce business.
Okay, thank you so much on that. So we've all felt the impacts of COVID, working from home. So on the commercial real estate side, what do you anticipate will be the long-term impacts, and how will our region be impacted? And I think Ryan and then maybe Scott, you guys would probably be the best to answer this question.
Sure. I mean, I think probably what you're focused on mostly is kind of the office space and occupancy of office. I think it will change. It will come back, but it will change. People doing the Monday through Friday, every day in the office. I don't know that we're going to see that even when things get back to normal. I think you're going to see a transition to maybe I'll do 3 days a week in the office and 2 days a week at home. I don't know that our feeling from a demand perspective, don't know that that really changes the demand perspective as much as maybe everybody fears, because I think the future office, I think we're going to end up probably de-densifying a little bit because of all this. So maybe there's not as much demand for new locations, but those new locations are probably slightly larger because of the de-densification. And then I would say, obviously the statistics been out there that this transition and this move, we've seen so many people from the Bay Area relocate to Sacramento, even though maybe their jobs are based in the Bay Area. Maybe this is Sacramento's opportunity to get some of these technology companies to finally set up a facility, a satellite facility in Sacramento, now that they've got more, people that are based here in Sacramento. Hopefully that's a good thing that comes out of COVID.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point, Ryan. Our organization is trying to really focus, and Scott can speak more to this, on just all the tech workers in the Bay Area that already live here, and having that ability to maybe, like you mentioned, open to satellite office and work as a mega region and really work with the Bay Area on utilizing, both of our resources to how do we benefit economically. So Scott, maybe you want to mention that.
Yeah, no, it is definitely some of the trends we're seeing. Our pipeline of companies looking at the area from all regions is up even during this time, both on the industrial, especially on the industrial side. But we are definitely seeing, interest in companies from that Bay Area, and that's been true even before COVID. There's just a lot of interconnectivity between our two regions and the shared workforce and whatnot. But I think for the, kind of the long-term impacts, I agree with Ryan. Things are going to change. There's companies that'll say we're never going to bring back more than 50% of our workforce, and you've got other companies that can't wait to get back into the office. So it's really going to depend on the company. The reason why we huddle in offices and is because of the creativity and that exchange of people and ideas that just happens when people are next to each other, and I don't see that changing. But I agree with Ryan. It's it's going to be different in how in which those do. There is going to be more, video conferencing and working from home. There's no doubt on that. And then on business travel as well. I mean, the death of business travel has been predicted, ever since I can remember, between the fax machine and email, and overnight delivery was going to kill the need to do face-to-face business. But in reality, long-term, there is still that need to be able to interact. And again, as we, develop more tradable industry sectors here in Greater Sacramento, we expect a strong recovery both for the economy and for our air travel. So with that, Michelle, I'll take it back.
Yeah, and real quick, Scott, I just want to run kind of talk about the CMC. Sacramento State and SMUD have done a great job, and that's kind of going to be close to the airport, correct?
No, that's actually the great thing about Sacramento is you're never more than 20 to 30 minutes away. So, they're setting up their temporary facility for the next few years, down at Depot Park, and then their permanent facility will be on the campus of Sacramento State. But I believe, 25, 30 minutes is somebody that's lived in the Sacramento market for, going on a year now. Still very easy to get in and out. And, as a son of an airline pilot, I've been to every major airport in this country, and Sacramento, is one of my favorite airports to fly in and out of.
It's a wonderful airport, and I agree with you on that, Scott. It's easy to get in and out of, and we're a major market, so that's a nice asset we have. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I'd like to hand it over real quick back to Mark Haneke to recap. I know we're running quick on time, so Mark.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, just wanted to share some of the survey results, but one side note here, J.D. Power does an annual airport satisfaction survey, and the results came out last Wednesday. We've participated with the J.D. Power survey for the last few years, and last year we were upgraded from the medium to large size category based on the number of passengers we handled annually. This year we came in 7th place out of 27 large airports, and we actually bettered our score by 9 points on a 1,000-point scale from 800 to 809. Just to point out, we are doing better than a lot of our peer airports. This aligns with that list of 10 airports that I showed earlier on my slides. The one airport that performs better than us in this survey is Orange County John Wayne. If any of you have flown through there, you know what a homey and feel it is, and very convenient, similar to some of the things that we have as well. But we're really pleased with that score. At the same time, they've identified some areas of opportunity for us to improve the score. So we will continue to work on that. But overall, very pleased to be in the upper quadrant of the results of the J.D. Power 2020 Large Airport Survey. Okay. And with that, I think we are right at about an hour, so I want to observe that time. But I definitely wanted to thank all of our panelists, all of our presenters, and all of the attendees. We really appreciate this opportunity to share this information with you. Michelle, I don't know if we have any questions last minute that we could answer quickly or not, but.
Sure. If anyone has any questions, if you can put it in the chat function below, and then Olivia and I will take a look at that. Let's see. Cindy wrote, Kevin, why is SFO doing worse than the other area airports? And I think
he addressed that.
Answered that with the leisure, or sorry, business travel, excuse me, business travel.
Yeah.
No, I don't think, oh, we've got one new message. No, I think Danielle Casey, no questions, but wonderful content. And thank you all so much for the information and collaboration. And we look forward to our next one with the airport.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.